こえる？あ、おはりやー。音聞こえるかな？なんかリアにこのイヤホンのとこまた聞こえないんですけど。はい、おはりやです。
The umbilicals are demated and the undock sequence has been commanded. Group 1 hooks are driving.
おはよう。
Endeavor copies on the big loop.
And that was confirmation that umbilicals have retracted, and we are waiting for all the hooks to current hooks are driving, and we are waiting for all of them to unhook before we have that full confirmation of separation. You'll hear from the core and Hawthorne as commentator.
Aと2分ぐらいでISS から離脱します。おはよう。
Endeavor SpaceX first set of hooks are open.
おはりやみんな。あと2分くらいかな。
And that was confirmation from the core to the crew.
おはりやおはりやおはりやおはりやおはりや。
We're about halfway there. Hooks of that first set are done. We're driving the second set now.
あと1分くらいかな。クルー2という今ドラゴン宇宙船のミッションって言ったらいいのかな。友人ミッションの帰りですね。ISS から地球に帰ってくるための離脱が行われます。おはりやありがとう。
Hooks are still driving.
グッドボタンもたくさんありがとうございます。中継度なしっぽいね。ちょっとわかんないね。映像はどうなってんのかね。気になる。ちょうどかぶってんのかな。おはりやおはりやです。
All hooks are open
And we have confirmation of separation.
お、confirmation of separation.
Dragon has started to push itself away from the station. And with that, Shane, Megan, Aki, and Toma have completed their journey aboard the International Space Station.
Station on 2, Dragon separation visually
クルー
confirmed.
2の中で一番好きな宇宙飛行士は誰ですか？そんな
Houston copies and
だって日本人宇宙飛行士さんが乗ってるじゃないですか。ハロー。
Confirmed physical separation at 1:05 p.m. Central Time as the station was flying 259 statute miles.
今一瞬だけ図が出た
As
ね。
the station and Dragon was
分離した？
That was confirmed physical separation at 1:05 p.m. Central Time as the station was flying 259 statute miles off the coast of Chile. 2 good undocking burns and a nominal
Dragon
impulsive
separation
retreat
from
burn. Next will be a
International
brief
Space
hold at
Station.
waypoint 1 before the fly-around
分離
sequence
し
is
たっぽい
executed.
ね。うまいこと。
We'll be
よかったよかっ
monitoring
た。
Crew Dragon throughout the departure sequence as it makes its way from the International Space Station.
分離した後
Godspeed to
に
Shane, Megan, Aki,
ISS
and
の
Tama.
周りを一周回るような軌道がさっき一瞬ね、なんか
To take you through the
映像
rest
画像
of
で
the
出てたん
departure
だけど、
sequence, we'll send you back over to Hawthorne.
なんかくるっと回るらしいよ。
Dragon is navigating
周
on
りを。
Dragon Eye 2. We will time out of impulsive retreat 1 point and into go to 1.
おー、めっちゃよく見えるじゃん。これすごい。
Endeavor copies.
イエーイ。デパーチャー。出発しましたね。今日は眠そうですね。まあ4時だからね。一番眠い時間じゃないかな。
Dragon SpaceX, we see the onboard warnings for Dragon Eye 1. No correction is required. Dragon is navigating on Dragon Eye 2.
Copy. Good Dragon Eye 2.
And we're following along as the Crew Dragon Endeavor is backing away from the International
Endeavor,
Space
we're going to
Station.
go to waypoint. MSs are docking suits.
SpaceX copies. And go to 1. And the MSs are doffing suits. We will transition cameras to external only if desired.
すごい。今こんな感じなんだね。ISS って。こんな宇宙に置いててずっと人がいるってやばいね。
SpaceX not required.
SpaceX copies.
Station on 2, the ISS thrusters are enabled.
Thank you, your like button. ありがとう。like ボタン嬉しいよ。
So a lot happening there. The Dragon is about 100 meters away from the International Space Station at this point. The crew inside have gotten the go to start doffing their suits. Now past the dynamic phase of undocking where the suits are required. So they'll start doffing as they head out to waypoint 1, which is about another 100 meters away as they slowly make their way out. They're going to waypoint 1, which is about 200 meters away, right at the edge of the keep-out sphere. They'll hold for about a minute before starting the fly-around maneuver. Starting at this very top or zenith position towards the space-facing side. See them backing up. They're about at this position, actually, right now, about halfway. Then they'll execute a 50-second fly-around burn 1. This will take them from the zenith or the space-facing side to the aft or the back of the station and cruise for a bit until they hit the aft portion. It's expected that during this part of the flight will be in an orbital nighttime. So right about these two burns, fly around burns 1 and burn 2, we should be getting some views of the International Space Station, maybe even of the Dragon, but they will be a little bit on the darker side. Then, of course, the next two burns, burn 3 and burn 4, will be in the daylight, and the whole maneuver itself will take about an hour and a half. You can see the position of the Dragon, the very top portion of the Dragon with the nose cone face down towards the International Space Station at all times. This allows for the crew inside with a perfect window view looking down at the International Space Station to take digital photographs the entire way around. It's a photographic survey
フォトグラフって言ってますね。
opportunity of the
写
exterior
真
of
撮る
the
みたいなこと
International
言ってる。
Space Station, allowing the crew to visualize some of the areas of the space station that can't normally be seen by some of the external cameras on board. Not too long after it makes this full loop over the course of an hour and a half, there are 2 departure burns. Departure burn 0, that gets them outside of the keep out sphere, which they will have been hugging for about an hour and a half. And then depart burn 1, which sends them right outside the approach ellipsoid. At that time, we are outside of joint operations between the International Space Station flight control teams and the Dragon teams here in Mission Control Hawthorne. They'll be taking control of Dragon's journey for the remainder of its flight down to splash down off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, targeting an on-time splashdown at 7:33 p.m. Pacific time tonight.
着水
Yeah,
は
so we've had an exciting morning so
日本
far.
時間のお
The
昼
calls that we
12
heard
時
just a couple
33
minutes
分
ago
頃
was an indication
です
that everything is looking good and that both Aki and Toma can doff or take off their spacesuit. This will allow them to have a little better mobility about the cabin in order to take those photos. Like Gary mentioned, these photos will help basically fill in the blanks that the onboard cameras currently have on station as
SpaceX Endeavour MS-1 is out of the suit, ready to support fly around.
SpaceX copies. MS-1 is ready for fly around on Dragon to ground.
えっと
All right, so there's that call indicating
SpaceX
that
Crew-2
Toma has removed his suit and
Undocking
he's ready to take
Loop
some
around
photos.
the
He'll be
space
doing
station
that
after docking today.
as the nose cone is still currently open. And so there's actually a very small circular window at the top of the forward hatch.
一周回るっぽいですね。
And he's going to be taking those photos of the station using that that port essentially. And it is tight quarters, so obviously being able to have a little better mobility will certainly be useful to him here coming up.
So again, they're past that dynamic phase, which is why they're getting out of their suits, and they'll remain there. The Dragon itself will fly autonomously. The crew do have the ability to
ミッションコント
execute
ロールセンター
small
のデザイン変わったねって。
manual
本当だ、変わ
correction
って
burns
る。
if necessary, but for the most part,
なんかこ
Dragon
の白いやつじゃなかっ
will
たよ
take
ね。
that flight around the International
見
Space
ないうち
Station
にあれあれ
automatically.
本当だ、変わってる
The
わ。
flight computers themselves were programmed just ahead of undocking, getting ready for that
最近ファルコ
essentially
ン9
fly
はあん
around
まり
sequence.
飛
For
ん
the
でな
fly
かっ
around
たか
sequence
ら
to begin, it's a different set of
久しぶり
burns
に見た
to
ね。
get them out to that hold point and then eventually around the station. We are getting fantastic views from the Dragon Eye, some of the Dragon cameras that are on the forward end of
Dragon
Dragon
Eye.
pointing down. And that position will be held really throughout this entire fly around flight. We're a little more than halfway there, about 130 meters at this point. Again, we're getting to about 180 to somewhere between 180 to 220 until we get to that waypoint 1 hold point. We will not stay there for very long. It's only about a
画面が見
minute.
たいよね、
And
こ
then if
の。
everything looks good, which the flight control
なんて書いてるんだろう。
team are trying to determine right now if they're good to go to proceed, they'll execute that fly around burn pretty much immediately.
Yeah, so that shot that we just had inside the cabin, you could actually see Toma there just underneath Megan and Shane taking these photos as we had indicated.
Oh,
hopefully we'll get that view back momentarily. But
Endeavour,
this view...
SpaceX, no response required, but we are going to clear the onboard Dragon Eye 1 and Dragon Eye like sensor
確
cross-check
かにこの
alerts
パネル
from
の
your
映像
board.
見たい。
They're no
だよ
longer
ね。
active.
なんか今こんな感じで操作してますみたいなやつが見れたらさ、めっちゃ最高だと思わない？
Copy.
From Dragon, and there's that shot inside the cabin. Pilot
左
Megan
側はなん
MacArthur
か
on the
ドッ
right
キ
hand
ングの
side, Commander Shane
画面です
Kimbrough
ね。
on the left hand
左
side,
と
and
右
that's
左
Toma
は。
Pesquet.
真ん中はなんだ？
Basically the designated professional photographer of this mission. If you've been following along on his Twitter account, there have been absolute golden photos that he's really captured all
全
along
体の
this
位置な
mission.
のかな？
And I'm excited to see, you know, what he might be putting his skills to here as he continues to survey the station during this fly around.
Interestingly enough, it looks like the photographic survey is beginning now, even before the fly around. Now that they have, they're only about 140 meters away at this point, but you can see an absolutely gorgeous view of the of the space-facing side of the International Space Station. Really good to take pictures now because we're getting this view while we're in an orbital daytime. It won't be long until we have a sunset here as we make that first burn maneuver to go from the very top or the zenith space-facing side. We're going to first go towards the aft or back of the space station, towards the Russian segment. That'll be the first part of this journey around the space station to take this photographic survey.
Now, if you're looking at the screen and wondering what that red thing is floating near Toma's head, and there's a blue one on the left-hand side, those are his earpieces. Those are basically part of the uniform. That's what allows him to hear communications during the mission, not necessarily at this point in time, but it looks kind of silly to see them floating there, so I just wanted to point those out for awareness.
Right below the International Space Station is the South Atlantic Ocean. We just passed the southern tip of South America, and we're now heading on a northeasterly course. The Terminator line that separates light from dark is right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean right now, so we're expecting sunset in about 15 minutes. So Thomas Pesquet taking pictures of the space-facing side of the entire International Space Station. While he's got about 15 minutes of daylight left.
Live shot there of Mission Control Center here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Just to the side of us. Like I mentioned before, it is a bustling Monday morning. Here we are a live manufacturing environment, so there is some background noise as we're literally building rockets and spacecraft right behind us. But yeah, that's a shot of our mission control here in Hawthorne.
So you're looking at the control room right now because we are sort of in between the video coverage that we're getting from the International Space Station. You see some of the views are absolutely gorgeous. There is a data link between the space station and the Dragon that provides high bandwidth communications, but for the most part, a lot of that video from the Dragon side will be when we go over ground stations. From the space station side, we use TDRS, or Tracking and Data Relay Satellites, that are in geosynchronous orbit about 23,000 miles from Earth. To give you some perspective, the Dragon crew and the International Space Station crew is about 250 miles, so quite a bit. But they provide that video coverage, the video downlink that we're seeing from the outside of the station. This is probably the longest period of a handover between the satellites that we'll see throughout the flyover maneuver. There's a couple of dips that we may see from video as they're making that their way around. And we'll just see what we get as we make our way around. We have that video coverage from the station camera, so we may be able to see the station looking out at, there we go, we're already getting some of that. Fantastic. So you can see with the station cameras overexposed, that aperture nice and wide, we can actually see some of the Draco engines firing those thrusters to stabilize Dragon, and it makes its retreat out to about 220 meters, now at about 160. Looking straight down at the International Space Station. Of course, they're looking straight up. Again, we're about 10 minutes away from an orbital sunset. You can see the views a little bit even dark at this point. It might be because of the overexposure, just to see some of those Draco engines firing. From Dragon, looking down at the International Space Station that we were seeing towards very shortly after undocking. We'll maybe get some of those as well. So this will be a very fun hour and a half.
Yeah, I want to point out real quick while we still have this view, the tiny light there in the center of the dark circle, that is the window take photos during the fly around. So right now, Tomas looking back at us as we're looking at him. Once again, you can see that nose cone is open. It will remain open for the duration of the fly around, and of course, prior to re-entry, it'll close once we are completely done utilizing the Draco thrusters located there.
デスクトップの音がね、入らなくなっちゃった。
The outline of the four forward bulkhead Dracos. Those will be used for a lot of the more important maneuvers. I think the most important of which is the deorbit burn. Very, very important maneuver. That is essentially committing Dragon to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere and splashing down. Right now, we're still tracking weather, and we will continue to do so over the next 8 hours as we make our way down closer towards that splashdown time, 7:33 p.m. Pacific, 10:33 p.m. Eastern Standard. But those four bulkhead Dracos will fire for 16 and a half minutes, super critical time, and that will put the Dragon in a position to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere.
This shot is also great because not only can we see the forward hatch, so that's the hatch that's utilized to get in and out of Crew Dragon while it's on station, but we can also slightly see the side hatch, which is on the left-hand side of the vehicle. It's a square shape, which doesn't look like a square from this angle. However, it's that panel there on the left-hand side of the vehicle.
めっちゃ綺麗になった。だよね。なんか一瞬めっちゃ綺麗な写真になったよね。
Ingress or get on board Dragon on day of launch, and of course it will be the hatch that they use later this evening to egress or exit the vehicle once the crew splashes down and is recovered by the SpaceX recovery team on one of our recovery vessels.
And that'll be open for the first time in 199 days. By the time that they splash down at 10:33 p.m. Eastern Time, they're only about 7 hours shy of making it to that 200-day mark. But it will be 199 by the time they actually open up that hatch. It's been closed the entire time that it's been on station. Very important section of the Dragon, right towards us, where we're looking at from this camera view, towards essentially what is the top of that side hatch. That's where the drogue parachutes are. Shortly after re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, mortars will fire to release those two drogue chutes.
Endeavour, SpaceX for fly around.
Go ahead for fly around.
Right, Endeavour, you are go to command ISS fly around once hold 1 is reached. It is a required urgent command as soon as we enter hold 1 to limit prop consumption. So repeating, you are go to command fly around once Dragon enters hold 1.
Endeavour copies go to initiate ISS fly around at hold 1 with no delay.
That is a very critical time. Megan MacArthur, the pilot of the Crew-2 mission, by the time they actually get to what they're talking about, hold 1, that's waypoint 1. Right now they're at about 185 meters from the International Space Station. They're heading out to approximately 220. At that point, Dragon will transition to hold mode, or hold 1, where it's holding at that waypoint. To limit the prop consumption, as was mentioned over the Dragon to ground loops, the big loop actually right now, as even the station team is listening in, the station crew, Mark Vandehei namely, who's monitoring this sequence right now. That will be about a minute that they have from the time that they enter hold 1 to the time that the first fly around burn is initiated. That burn being the first of 4. It'll be a zenith to aft burn. It's about a 50-second burn that maneuvers the Dragon into a position to essentially cruise down to right behind or at the aft section of the International Space Station.
各ポイントでどれぐらい燃やすかの話をしてたのかなと思います。
So again, you're seeing, we were getting fantastic views of the Dragon looking right up at it. And Kate, you were perfectly describing that tiny little hole that Thomas is going to be taking photos out of. You can see even after that first burn is executed, those burns will actually keep Dragon in a position where that forward hatch, what we're looking at right now with that bright circle at the very dead center, that's where Thomas Pesquet will be taking some of the digital photographs. That forward hatch will be pointing towards the International Space Station at all times as it makes its way around the International Space Station, with again all 4 fly around burns to make that perfect loop all the way around.
今から ISS の周りを
Once again, this
何
flyover
回か
maneuver
ドラ
is
エン
brand
ジン
new
を
to
吹く
Crew
ことによっ
Dragon.
てくる
This
く
is
る
the first time that
回
we will
っ
be
て
executing it.
撮
The
影をす
maneuver
るらしい。
itself is basically a photographic survey of the station. Yeah, so there you can see kind of big picture. Dragon is going to be making one big loop around station, and Thomas Pesquet will be taking photographs through the port window, essentially there on the forward hatch of the station, which will hopefully fill in some gaps that currently exist in terms of the photographs that have taken of station. So even though there are many cameras on station, unfortunately there are certain spots, certain angles that can't be photographed just due to physical location. So Thomas will be taking pictures, and essentially Dragon will be making one big loop around station to perform this
何時頃
photographic
まで配
survey.
信する？どうし
This
よ
was
う
a
ね。
normal.
これずっと1
This was
時
a
間や
very
ってんのか
standard
な？
procedure for the shuttle. The shuttle
め
used
っち
to
ゃ
undock
分
from
か
the
んなかったか
International
らこ
Space
れ
Station.
分離して終わりか
Regularly
なと思ってた
survey
からさ。
the station, providing updates particularly when it was under construction. Right, it was a very dynamic phase. That was more of the assembly phase of the International Space Station. We're in pretty much the third decade. After more than 20 years, we are in it. This is the time of maximum utilization. So there have been a couple of additions recently to the International Space Station, namely commercial modules. I think most recently was the Nanoracks Bishop airlock, which is essentially a way to deploy satellites. It also removes trash. It can also retrieve some ORUs or replacement unit spare parts from the outside with the help of the robotic arm. So there are a couple of new elements, and we'll be able to see that for the very first time after this fly around. The last fly around that happened was on board a Russian Soyuz, where Drew Feustel, NASA astronaut, used a handheld camera to do the exact same thing as the Soyuz undocked from the International Space Station. It did the same thing, did a photographic survey as it flew around, and so those are from 2018. So this will be brand new. 2021, we'll get to see some of those new modules,
イプシロンとかのさ、打ち上げもある
like
から
the
さ。
Nanoracks airlock module,
ど
as
う
well as
し
a
よ
couple of
う。
other
寝よ
things.
う
The
かな。
Bartolomeo external platform that's on the European Space
あ、
Agency
すごいす
side.
ごい。見て見て
So
見て
this will
見
be
て。
very important to see.
ドラ
So
コ
there
エン
on
ジ
your
ン。
screen, that is once again a live view of Crew Dragon Endeavour departing the International Space Station with the Crew-2 crew on board. And those pulses that you see are actually pulses coming from the Draco thrusters on board Dragon in order for Dragon to hold position and maneuver. Like we said, it's going to be performing this fly-around maneuver. Those Draco thrusters we
2時
can
間
see
くらいかかるみたいなんだけど
activating
ね。2
in
時間
order
か
to
かるのか。2時間かかるの
hold
ちょっ
course.
と見てらんないかもしれないな。
It looks very bright because the cameras themselves on the International Space Station are right now overexposed. By doing so, it allows us to see some of those Draco maneuvering thrusters.
いつもルームに吹かしてありますだって。
There, it's becoming clearer now. We're about to enter into an orbital sunset, so you were getting some glimpses from the Dragon. We just got a second of like looking down at the space station, still a little bit illuminated by the sun. That will not last very long. About 2 more minutes is when we're expected to hit that hold 1 point at about 220 meters. We're at about 217 at this point, so we're slowing down. Getting ready to get to that hold point. Again, Megan MacArthur, the pilot, who from this camera view is on the right.
結構離れた
There we
ね。
go.
全体
Copy Endeavor, fly around is
で
initiated.
全景で ISS が望めるくらいの感
So
じ
a
ま
little
で
bit
行ったっ
earlier
ぽ
than
い。
expected, but it seems like we did hit that
あ、めっ
hold
ちゃ移動して
point,
るじゃん。
and it was not long at all before Megan MacArthur initiated that burn. Right now we're in a 50-second burn.
1時間半かかると
The
さっ
first
きの
of
話で
4
聞いたよう
to
な。
fly around the
そっ
International
かそっ
Space Station.
か。
Dragon, SpaceX on Dragon to ground. We see the onboard alerts for Dragon Eye. Time of flights are still converged.
めっちゃ一緒に見たいけど、朝次9時
Say again, you are not readable.
51分のイプシロンを見るのと、
We see the
これ
onboard
の
alerts
着
for
水を
Dragon
見たい
Eye
の
1
で、
and Dragon Eye 2
配信を
geometric
ずっとしてる
filters.
と多分
The time of
リアが
flight
死ぬの
filters
で、
are still converged.
ある程度見たら終わりにしようかな。もし見たい人がいたら元の方を
and SpaceX still very difficult to hear.
省エネで軌道で ISS を一撮影するのは90分ほどかかりますがどうやるんでしょうね。
In this quadrant, is that correct?
ぐるっと回るのをね。
That's affirmative endeavor. The geometric filters were lost, but the time of flight
だんだん
filters
向
are
き変わってき
still
た。撮影する向き。
converged. So Dragon is still in a
あ、
good
面白い。
configuration for fly around.
適度に出るのよ。あ、ありがとう。ちょっと角度変わったっぽく見える。なんかね、少し角度変わるとこぐらいまで見たいな。もうちょっと見たい。鳴き声変わよ。え、何か違うの？
Thanks much.
リアって鳴きの声してるの今。マジで？
See you outside, but very quickly wanted to say thanks to all of you. Thomas, thanks for being such a great guy, an inspiring, famous person from France. Aki, you're a commander who knew exactly when to be serious and when to be funny. Let me just stop talking if I'm talking too long. Jade, thanks for being such a great example of what putting others first looks like. And Megan, thanks for becoming a sister to me up here in space. I'll miss hearing your laughter in adjacent modules. Hey Mark, we're really gonna miss you.
めっちゃ普通に撮影してんの。面白いね。
a lot from you, and I know you're gonna treat Crew-2 really
頑張って
well.
撮ってる
And,
撮って
let
る。
us know if we can do anything for you. Take care. Fly safe. Yeah, get home safely. It's been a great part being. It's been great
ほっ
being
とけ
part
ば
of
一
the
周し
team.
ますからね。もう確かにそういえば確かにそうだね。
Likewise, my friend. Take care of
90
Anton
分
and Piotr
で
for
地球を一周するのと一緒にってことかな多分。もし違ったら言って。
You were hearing NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei, the sole NASA astronaut now on board the International Space Station, relieved of his duties to monitor the retreat of Dragon out to the hold point. Now he can stand down from monitoring the fly around. Some wonderful words from Mark Vande Hei, who got to spend the entire 197 days that the Crew-2 astronauts spent on board the International Space Station.
こうやってさ、なんかライトアップの
Vande
違うさ、何種類かの
being a
画像
crew
が出て
member
くるの
that's
って
staying
さ、
on board
これ
for
はあ
almost
れ
a
かな
year
カメラ
as
が何個
part
か
of the
違うっ
Soyuz
て感じな
rotation
のかな
crew. A shout out to the Crew-3 astronauts
今
who
画面
are
見て
set
る
to
のなんだ
launch
ろう
just a few days from now, no earlier than November
なんか
10th.
人間の
To
影かな
make
こ
their
れ
way
は
to the International Space Station, it'll be
ゼ
Mark
ロ
Vande
60
Hei's job
30
to brief them on everything that the space
何
station,
バイタル
everything about the space station, where things are, about emergency procedures. So he'll do the handover as Crew-2 is returning home now.
As we mentioned previously,
さっき酸素夜に入る
we
と言ってたの
prefer
そ
to
れ
do
かな
direct
なんか
handovers
全
from
体的
crew
に
to
暗くなったよね
but the weather off the Space Coast and just around Florida in
夜側に
general
突入したっ
has
てことなのか
been
な
incredibly tricky the last week, really. So the teams at NASA and SpaceX did reviews and jointly made the decision that the best thing to do for both Crew-3 and Crew-2 would to be bring the Crew-2 crew home before launching Crew-3, purely because of weather restrictions. We've been monitoring splashdown conditions on both sides of Florida, including wave height and wind speed, and those are really primary restrictions on allowing the crew to splash down, and it just happens to be that today was our best day to attempt that splashdown.
And before undocking, we did a weather brief, and
Undocking 5時に始めるんじゃない
the
どういうこと
Crew-2 astronauts will, are undocked today because they did a weather brief of the prime landing site Pensacola, and it looks fantastic. Even with the trajectory, it's about 8.5 hours, even fitting in this fly around maneuver, which they're doing right now. So we just executed a good 50-second burn, the first of 4 to fly around the International Space Station. We're now in a cruise phase between what's called the zenith, or the space-facing side of the International Space Station. We're heading to aft. That's the Russian segment of the International Space Station. We'll be getting some great views the whole way. We're in an orbital nighttime, so we're relying on some of the external floodlights on the outside of the space station to illuminate those views, and Thomas Pesquet has his camera ready taking some of those surveys. We're getting some views as we're going in and out of that connection from between Dragon and Station. It looks like we have some Dragon views now. You can see a lot of, particularly the habitable volume of the space station is illuminated. We'll be in this position for at least this one from the zenith or the space facing to the aft or the back for about 20 minutes. It's about a 20-minute transit to get to that next point, which is essentially right on the V bar or the velocity bar that's directly behind the International Space Station. There are no hold points throughout this maneuver, so right at about that time they'll execute another 50-second burn. That'll do essentially the same thing, maneuver from the aft section or the back to the very underside of the International Space Station. We did hear Mark Vande Hei actually mention that even though he's not in a monitoring phase for watching the fly-around maneuver, he's been relieved of those duties. Right on the Earth-facing side of the International Space Station is a 7-bay window called the cupola. Provides fantastic views of the Earth, and it's used very frequently for capture operations for some of the cargo craft that come to and from the International Space Station. But it'll also provide a very good view of his crewmates who will be flying around the International Space Station at that time on the underside or on the Earth-facing side of the International Space Station. So we'll hopefully get a couple of fantastic shots from Mark Vande Hei taking some of those photos. By about that time, when the Dragon is directly underneath the International Space Station, we should even be in an orbital sunrise. So we should get some sunrise photos as well.
Yeah. The shot that we had a little earlier with that nighttime view and all the exterior lighting of station, something about it so black and white, kind of looked like it could be in a Kubrick film.
Right.
Yeah. As we saw before, oh, right there it is actually. We have some shots there inside the Crew Dragon capsule. When we get that back, you might notice that Thomas Pesquet has taken off his spacesuit to allow him to have better mobility while taking some photos. Once again, this fly-around maneuver is essentially a photographic survey of station. And this is super helpful because, as Gary mentioned before, the last time this was performed was 2018, I think you said?
That's right.
And there have been lots of new additions on station since then. So this is a new capability for Crew Dragon. This will be the first time we're executing it today. And yeah, so Thomas Pesquet will be taking photos. They're in night mode inside Crew Dragon.
Likely to limit the glare from the lit cabin inside the Dragon, likely reflecting off of the single window that Thomas Pesquet is using to take those photographs. We're in an orbital nighttime, right? So the only thing illuminating the outside of the space station is the lights of the space station itself. So limit those glares and get even better photographs. I cannot wait to see these photographs that Thomas is taking.
Yeah, you can kind of think of it as, you know, imagine if you're in a car and, you know, somebody's driving a car in the middle of the night and you're sitting in the passenger seat and you turn the interior cabin lights on and you try to take a picture of something scenic outside, right? You're probably not going to be able to capture that because the interior cabin lights are reflecting off of your window. So you turn the lights off and enable night mode on your camera and take some pictures.
I bet you they do the same thing during crew sleep as well. The Crew-2 astronauts had about a 24-hour transit to the International Space Station. Almost. It was just shy of 24 hours. So as part of that was an 8-hour sleep period. So everybody found a place inside Dragon, either bunking up in the seats, which I think is more common, or just finding a random spot to strap yourself and float. But they get an 8-hour rest period. Not on this flight because it is a very short transit, and so we're going to be doing this for about an hour and a half, circling around the International Space Station, and then from there, you're really only at about, 6.5 hours, maybe 6 hours, from the time that you execute that first departure burn, which is departure burn 0, to break out of the fly around, and then make your way towards splashing down off the coast of Florida.
Yeah. So once again, we have been keeping an eye on weather. We are targeting a splashdown off the coast of Florida near Pensacola, and we're targeting that at 7:33 p.m. Pacific time this evening. So, like Gary said, once we complete the fly around maneuver, while it will be another 6.5 hours left, big picture, that's actually a pretty quick trip home, and I'm sure that. After the 199 days that they have spent in space, they're all excited to get home and see their families.
Absolutely. So they're going to be splashing down off the coast of Florida, and there's going to be recovery teams there. The Go Navigator recovery ship will be stationed out in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll see a lot of that action as we get closer to that period, about 8 hours, maybe a little less than that at this point from now, until we actually splash down off of the coast. We're going to see all the action. It'll be a nighttime splashdown, unfortunately, but we did see a lot of that for Crew 1, and we did get some pretty good views of the fast boats going out and really readying that capsule inside the water to be picked up by the A-frame, which is on the back of the Go Navigator and positioned inside the Dragon nest. Like you said, Kate, from there, the crew themselves are going to be extracted, or they're going to egress the Dragon spacecraft. There are some medical facilities that are on the boat, but what will likely happen is they'll take a helicopter ride out to the coast of Florida, where they'll have different planes stationed ready to take them home. 3 of the crew members, Shane Kimbrough, Megan MacArthur, and Aki Hoshide, will take a plane out to Houston. They'll undergo a series of additional medical checks and just make sure they're ready to go, and they'll have a chance to see their family. Thomas Pesquet will depart for Europe. So we're in the middle of a fly around period now, so we should be in this period for, it's a cruise phase between the zenith or the space facing side until we get to the aft side. We're here for about another 10 minutes. It's about a 20-minute transit from the very top, or the R bar, essentially right in line with the top of the International Space Station, to the aft position. There's going to be no stops along the way. It's a very fluid transit from each of these different periods, but once we get to the V bar, we're essentially right in line with the velocity bar of the International Space Station. You can see it there. It's the point directly to the back or to the aft of the International Space Station. Right there, they'll execute another 50-second burn to enter into another cruise phase. It limits the prop, right? They need to save a lot of that prop for some of the departure burns, and you can see 2 of them are part of this fly around to actually break out from it. But this is essentially where we are right now. In fact, we're about halfway through the maneuver. This position that you're seeing right now in this graphic is pretty much where they are, about halfway between the zenith, or the space-facing most point, and the aft, or the backmost point of the International Space Station. And again, a 50-second maneuver. It's just to limit prop. After these 50-second burns, they enter into a cruise phase. So the next maneuver will be just about another 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more than that, 25 minutes to get from the aft position to nadir, or the bottom position. Right about that time, they'll be entering into just about this period where you see the Crew Dragon on this graphic. That will be about where we see an orbital sunrise. So we'll be able to photograph the underside of the space station while it's lit and illuminated by the sun. And about that time, we should see Mark Vande Hei. Well, not see Mark Vande Hei, but it's about that time that Mark Vande Hei from out inside the space station will be taking digital photographs of the Dragon, as the Dragon is taking photographs of the cupola. Maybe we may even get to see Thomas Pesquet take a photo of the cupola, maybe seeing Dragon, seeing Mark Vande Hei inside. Another 50-second burn right at the bottom there at the nadir position to get over to the forward end of the International Space Station, all in the daylight. So we should be getting some great views of, at this point, which is the U.S. side, U.S. OS side. We'll be getting to see some of the U.S. modules, some of the commercial modules that I was talking about, as well as the international modules. Right about here, you'll get some great views of the nadir, the underside, as well as part of the forward parts of the Japanese module, the GEM, as well as the Columbus module, which is the European module, each with their own respective external facilities. The Japanese exposed facility has a lot of experiments on the outside, and then we have the commercial module Bartolomeo, a ESA, European Space Agency astronaut, and Airbus partnership, which is another external platform, does a lot of the same things, external payloads. So we'll get to see some of those, which have been installed. Well, the Bartolomeo at least has been installed recently.
Endeavour, SpaceX on Dragon to ground for cabin temperature.
よし、あと15分ぐらいちょっと見守って、5時ぐらいになったらリアも寝ようかな。実戦の矢印って進捗じゃないのか。違うような気がするけど、どうなんだろうね。多分違うと思う。
Been increasing slightly and is at a little elevated level.
あんまり
how you're feeling
今どこにいるかみたいなのとパパッと出してくれてるわけじゃないみたいだね。今日のお昼の12時33分頃に着水するみたいなので、それの配信もやるつもりでいます。みんなもしお昼ご飯食べながらでもいいから、なんかちょっと時間取れそうだったら一緒に見てみませんか。着水。
We were seeing Commander Shane Kimbrough and pilot Megan MacArthur inside, stationed in their same seats. They were still suited up. We saw Thomas Pesquet doffed or took off his suit fairly quickly after undocking and some of those initial burns, the undocking burn and the impulsive retreat burn, because it's his job to take photos of the outside of the International Space Station. I thought I saw Aki there for a bit.
I think
with his suit still on, assisting Thomas Pesquet, but we'll be in this position for quite some time. The whole fly-around maneuver takes about an hour and a half.
Now, for those that might be unfamiliar with how teams in space communicate with those on ground, you have probably noticed by now that there is a beep that precedes communication. This is known as the Quindar tone. If you've watched pretty much any space movie ever, you probably might recognize it. But essentially, that tone rings, and then the destination. So, for example, if I were calling Dragon here from SpaceX, I would say Dragon SpaceX, because I am calling Dragon and I am calling from SpaceX. So you basically identify the destination first, as well as the origin of the communication as well.
And then what loop you are calling on.
Yes.
So it's who you want to talk to, who is calling, who is doing the calling, and then what loop you're essentially talking on. For a while they were on the big loop, right? So the International Space Station could hear them as well, and you heard that term. That's where really every team is integrated. The Dragon teams here in Mission Control Hawthorne, the Dragon crew, Houston Mission Control, which is controlling the International Space Station, as well as the Space Station crew themselves. For once we exit outside of the approach ellipsoid, we'll break that off and we'll be relying namely on Dragon to ground. So again, we're in the cruise phase between the nadir or the space-facing side and the aft side. We should be here for another maybe 6 minutes or so until we get to the aftmost portion or the very back of the International Space Station. From there, we'll do another 50-second burn to get us from the aft to the nadir position, which is at the very bottom. And right around that time, we should hopefully be seeing views from the International Space Station or from the Dragon, depending on the ground sites and our coverage there. But we should be seeing an orbital sunrise as well.
Yeah, so there on your screen is a view of Mission Control Center here at SpaceX Hawthorne. This is where ground teams are commanding Dragon when necessary. But for the most part, Dragon is flying itself. This whole process of undocking and deorbiting, this whole journey is intended to be autonomous. Dragon essentially driving itself, which is a super important capability.
Now you're seeing the commander and the pilot. When we do get those views, Shane
現場の
Kimbrough
様
as
子を見
commander,
たい
Megan
です
MacArthur as
先生
pilot. They're still in their
見えない
designated positions, the commander and pilot seats, and they are monitoring every step of the way, right? Even though Dragon is completely controlling itself, they
すご
have
く寝
views
起
of
き
the
の
Dragon Eye
タイ
camera,
ミン
which is
グなの
looking
で
down at
い
the
や
space station. You
全
can see
然
that on
英
the
語が訳
commander's
せない
side.
ことが判
They
明
have views of the trajectories, they have views of the Earth, they're looking at all the thrusters. They are checking every step of the way to make sure that the Dragon is healthy. But they also have, of course, the teams here in Mission Control Hawthorne doing the same. Even monitoring their cabin temperature, making sure they're at
あ、楽してくれ
they're
た。あ
very
り
nice
が
and
とう。
comfortable inside the
6分で
Dragon.
下方を遷移する噴射をして、
Yeah,
まも
they
なく
still
ヒルガン
have
出る。
a few hours
ヒル
left
ガ
to
ン出るは
go.
聞こえた気が
I
す
can
る。
imagine that working up a sweat at this point, probably not the most comfortable condition. As we saw earlier, Tuma has actually taken off his suit in order
2番目の場所って
to
ことかな。
perform the photographic survey during this fly-around maneuver. We did see Aki off to the side, still in his suit, and like Gary just said, both Megan and Shane are still in their suits as well, in their seats.
And they'll be in this position for quite some time. So again, they're going to just remain really in a monitoring position and with Thomas Pesquet with the handheld camera. So we'll continue to provide the coverage of that. And in fact, we're going to provide continuous coverage of the journey home. We'll be here for quite some time as we break out from the keep out sphere and the approach ellipsoid and start making some of those calculated burns. There are 4 burns to bring us home. First 2 happen pretty shortly after the fly-around maneuver. There's no holding. It's just the fly-around happens around the space station, and then if they get the go, they'll execute the depart burn 0. You can see here's the entire maneuver from, and this is where we are right now after the 50-second burn. The first quadrant of the fly-around going from the zenith or the space-facing to the aftmost part. Well, each of these different points that you see fly-around burns 2, 3, and 4 will be 50-second burns. It's the same maneuver for each of these different sections with the Dragon pointing towards the International Space Station every step of the way. We should be getting the same Dragon Eye camera views whenever we can. We'll be getting the external camera views from the space station looking out at Dragon, so we should get some pretty good coverage.
Endeavour, SpaceX on the big loop. The aft waypoint has been reached.
Never copies, we see that.
サンライズの時の映像があるかもってコメントしてくれたのかな。あ
And
り
with
が
the
とう、フ
aft
ッテージ。
waypoint reached,
なるほど
it
ね。
means we are in that burn. So the burn, the 50-second burn to get from the aftmost position to the nadirmost position. So you see on this graphic, fly around burn 2 is now underway.
ごめん、ロケットローンチストリームと上に書いてるけど、今日はね、ロケットローンチではなくてね、ISS から宇宙船が分離したところですよ。
So if you've just joined us, Crew Dragon Endeavour has departed the space station with an undocking, undocking separation at 11:05 a.m. Pacific. They have now moved away from station and have begun the fly-around maneuver, which is essentially a photographic survey of the station.
So they weren't.
And we did get confirmation that the full 50-second burn,
ロシアンセクションあるのかな。
second of 4 burns has been completed. We have a good fly around burn 2,
ない
or
かも
what's
しれ
called the
ない
aft
ね。
to
なんで
nadir
ないん
burn.
だよね。
So now we're in a cruise phase, and this cruise
この
phase
後
will
北
take
関
place for
東
about
と
25
南
minutes.
東北の間横断す
We'll
る
be
っぽい。
cruising from
見
the
える
very
か
back
な
of the
みんな。
station to the
ISS のさ、トラッ
nadirmost
ク
point.
なん
We
ちゃら
should be
なんだっ
getting
け。
a sunrise here soon as well.
ISS を見ようみ
In
たいなやつあった
about
っけ。希望を
11
見ようだっ
minutes,
け。
we should be getting a sunrise. So about halfway through, right about the position where you see the Dragon in this graphic, about halfway between the aftmost and the nadirmost point, will be about when we start seeing the sun rise and start to illuminate the underside of the International Space Station. So Thomas Pesquet should be getting some fantastic shots of that section.
めっちゃよく見えそうだよ。見てみたらいいんじゃないかな。すごいすごい。
As we've mentioned before, the blackout on the video feed is expected. We
5時5分
knew
頃
that
か
this
ら
was going to happen a number of
見えるっ
times
て。
throughout the fly around,
見えるって。 希
partially
望
due
を
to ground
見よう
station
見えると思う
coverage.
よ。
And when we get those views back, we will bring them back to you as soon as we have them as well. But unfortunately, right now we don't have those views inside Dragon or of station.
Are you measuring in space engineering? これはなんて答えようかな。専攻はスペースエンジニアリングですか。まあ専門はそうですね。宇宙工学、イエスかな。イエス。
which is anticipated. There are some handovers. It's a very long maneuver, about an hour and a half to get from the very top of the station and make essentially what is a full loop. It's a whole hour and a half. So through that time, we'll be essentially what is a full orbit of the Earth. We undocked right over the South Pacific Ocean, I believe. So, and then right around the time that the fly-around maneuver was executed, we were over the South Atlantic. So right about that time, we should be somewhere over the South Atlantic. Right around the time the fly-around is complete.
But in the meantime, let's learn a little bit about the crew on board. Starting with our commander, Kimbro. He is the commander of Crew Dragon spacecraft and the Crew-2 mission. Kimbro is responsible for all phases of flight from launch to re-entry. Selected as a NASA astronaut in 2004, Kimbro first launched aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour for a visit to the station on the STS-126 mission in 2008, and then aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft for his first long-duration mission for Expedition 4950 in 2016. After 199 days in space during Expeditions 65 and 66, he has spent a total of 388 career days in space, the fourth highest for any U.S. astronaut, and performed 9 career spacewalks. Kimbro is also a retired U.S. Army colonel and earned a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York, and a master's degree in operations research from the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta.
Megan MacArthur is the pilot of Crew Dragon spacecraft, and she's the second in command for the mission. MacArthur is responsible for spacecraft systems and performance. Expeditions 65 and 66 was her very first trip to the International Space Station. She was selected as an astronaut in 2000, and MacArthur launched on the Space Shuttle Atlantis as a mission specialist on STS-125, which was the final Hubble Space Telescope surfacing mission in 2009. MacArthur operated the shuttle's robotic arm over the course of the 12 days, 21 hours that she spent in space on shuttle, capturing the telescope and moving the crew members during the 5 spacewalks needed to repair and upgrade the telescope. She holds a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from the University of California, Los Angeles, and a doctorate in oceanography from the University of California, San Diego. She now has a career of 212 days in space.
Akihiko Hoshide is a mission specialist for Crew-2. As a mission specialist, he works closely with the commander and pilot to monitor the spacecraft during dynamic launch and re-entry phases of flight. Hoshide joined the National Space Development Agency of Japan, NASDA, which is currently JAXA, in 1992 and was selected as an astronaut candidate in February 1999. Hoshide is a veteran of 2 space flights in addition to Expedition 65-66. In June 2008, he flew to the International Space Station on the STS-124 mission to deliver the Japanese experiment module Kibo to the station. From July to November 2012, he stayed on the space station for 124 days as a flight engineer for the Expedition 3233 mission. The Crew Dragon will be the 3rd spacecraft that he has flown to the orbiting laboratory. He commanded the station for Expedition 65 and performed 1 spacewalk, bringing his career total to 4. He spent a total of 340 days in space on his 3 flights, 8 days short of Koichi Wakata's record-setting mark of 348 days in space by a Japanese astronaut.
Thomas Pesquet is also a mission specialist for Crew-2, working with the commander and pilot to monitor the spacecraft during the dynamic launch and re-entry phases of flight. He was selected as an astronaut candidate by ESA in May of 2009 and worked as a Eurocom, communicating with astronauts during space flights from the Mission Control Center. He previously flew as part of Expeditions 50 and 51, launching aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft in October 2016, and he spent 196 days in space, returning to Earth in June of 2017. His mission also included 2 spacewalks to maintain the station, one to replace batteries on an electrical channel, and one to detect a cooling leak and service the robotic arm. He performed an additional 4 spacewalks for Expeditions 65 and 66 to outfit the station with new solar arrays, bringing his career total spacewalk to 6. He commanded the station for part of Expedition 66 and has a career total of 395 days in space, the most amount of time in space by any European Space Agency astronaut.
So if you just joined, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so we are now still in a fly-around position. We just passed the first quadrant of 4, detailing and surveying the first, I guess, quarter of the maneuver, which is the space-facing side to the aftmost portion. That covers a lot of the very top as well as the Russian segment. We are now essentially underneath the space station, and now with the external views of the space station cameras themselves, getting views of the Crew Dragon as we are still in the orbital nighttime, seeing the navigation lights as well as the little tiny hole in the middle where Thomas Pesquet is with a digital camera surveying the International Space Station, and we should be seeing sunrise soon, so hopefully we'll be getting some more illuminated views of Dragon as it continues to maneuver.
Yeah, so that small light that we saw is actually a small window located on the forward hatch, and like Gary said, that is the window that Thomas is utilizing in order to take the photographs for the survey of the station.
Dragon SpaceX, we see the onboard alert for Dragon Eye. No crew response at this time. We are still in the cruise state.
Endeavour copies.
So as I was saying, that's essentially a shot of the top of Dragon, and that small window is what the crew is using in order to perform this photographic survey that we're doing today on the fly-around maneuver.
That's right, we got 15 minutes just about of this quadrant of the fly-around maneuver. In about 3 or 4 minutes, we should be seeing an orbital sunrise. So we'll see the views of the Dragon get a little bit brighter. And of course, from the inside of Dragon, the International Space Station will get a little brighter as well, making those photographs all the more useful.
SpaceX for awareness. Dragon Eye 1 time of flight has reconverged, but we will leave it on the board in case it loses convergence again.
カメラ動かしてるってことは結構動いてるって感じか。めちゃくちゃ早く回ってるんじゃないかな。1時間にじゃないや。
There's watching that Dragon Eye. It's the forwardmost camera. So right from that little hatch window is where Thomas Pesquet is taking the digital photographs, but also on that same side is navigation guidance navigation equipment called the Dragon Eye, which provides detailed survey or detailed look and guidance, navigation guidance of the International Space Station, and really helps with this maneuver, relying on essentially watching the space station, making sure that it is in the predicted orientation, the predicted state as it makes its way through this fly-around maneuver.
Yeah. And as we mentioned before, the fly-around is basically a photographic survey of the station with all of the recent additions to station. There are areas that the onboard cameras are unable to photograph, and the last fly-around maneuver was performed in 2018 by Soyuz. So this is the first time that we are executing a fly-around with the Crew Dragon, and Thomas Pesquet is the designated photographer floating about in the cabin in any orientation he needs in order to get the photographs required in order to complete the survey.
Now you see, when we get those views from inside the Dragon, we're seeing that the commander and pilot are still in place. They're still suited up. They're not pressurized. There's no need to. In fact, for nominal departure from the International Space Station, at this point, all the crew will have doffed their suits. But because we're inside the TVAC sphere and the commander and pilot are in a monitoring phase, they're just going to hang tight for at least an hour and a half and just take a look at all the different views. They're watching the Dragon Eye. They're watching the Dragon's orientation position. They're watching the thrusters, making sure that the vehicle that they're flying right now, or rather that is flying them, is in a tip-top shape as they make their way through the maneuver. After the hour-and-a-half fly-around is done and they perform the two depart burns to break out of the keep-out sphere and the approach ellipsoid, at that time they'll be able to doff or take off their suits for a couple of hours, and they'll make sure that they're dry, and they'll put them in a temporarily stowed position before they have to put them right back on again, because they have to get ready right before the trunk separation and cloth separation, put them right back on, because there's a very fast sequence of events that's going to happen. You're starting to see views of the Dragon now, and in the back is the trunk. The trunk will separate and then orient it for re-entry, and that very dynamic phase of flight, we will require the suits.
日本上空を通っているのではないかなと思います。
Sunrise in orbit. We are seeing the Dragon capsule being illuminated by the first glimpses of sunlight. And we should be able to see, when we do get those views from Dragon looking down at the International Space Station, the station itself being illuminated by that light.
見えるかな。さすがに見えないと思うけど見てこよう。日本海の上にいるんだって。
But we can also see the 4 Draco thrusters located there on the forward hatch. These are what are utilized in order to move Dragon away from station. Those are the 4 larger circles in a rectangular shape there around the hatch.
Those forward bulkhead Dracos will perform some of the more important deorbit maneuvers, or departing and deorbit maneuvers, namely the deorbit burn, which is a 16.5-minute burn. Very, very essential that those forward bulkhead Dracos execute that maneuver. It commits them to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, aiming for what is the prime location now of Pensacola, Florida. Very shortly after that 16.5-minute burn, it will only take a couple of minutes for the nose cone, which you're seeing opened up here from this view at the very top portion of your screen. They'll only take a couple of minutes to close and protect some of those critical components, including the docking mechanism, the forward bulkhead Dracos, some of the guidance navigation equipment. But for the most part during this flight, the nose cone will remain open.
青塗りって青くないよね。
And of course, this camera that we have here keeps having to readjust because Crew Dragon is currently performing one big loop of the station. And of course, the camera has to readjust in order to keep Dragon in its views. Just coasting away.
おお、すごい。結構遠くから。
We're in this cruise phase for a little less than 10 minutes until we execute the third of 4 fly-around burns. This will take us from the nadir, or the very bottom portion of the International Space Station, in between the station and the Earth. Another 50-second burn to bring it to the very forward end.
皆さんの服は青ですか？緑ですか？めっちゃいいとこついてくるね。 めっちゃいいとこついてくんね。リアのこの服は青緑です。めっちゃいいとこやってくるじゃん。ちょうど青と緑の間の色が好きで。
Toma, to take these photos.
これは青緑でしょ。
As Gary mentioned before, the crew will be taking off their suit in a little while to get comfortable in what's not really a break period, but it is a small break in the action before the dynamic events pick back up again prior to re-entry. But these spacesuits are custom fitted for each astronaut. They go through a series of checkouts prior to leaving the station, and so they'll do the same once again when they put the suits back on. But as you mentioned before, we saw Toma get out of his suit pretty quickly. Actually, I was really surprised to see how fast he popped back up on screen. Ready to begin the fly-around maneuver and begin using that DSLR camera to take photos. And yeah, so each of these suits are custom fitted for each individual astronaut. So there's no option to switch around.
You are committed to a suit.
Yeah.
right, we got a little less than 10 minutes of this cruise phase until we execute that other burn. There's two more.
今検索したんですが、あれスペース X で作ったんですかって。
over to the forward
今飛んでいるスペースクラフト、宇宙船はスペース X の
So we'll get fantastic views of
クルー
both
ド
the
ラゴン
Dragon
エン
and
デ
the
バー号
International
ってい
Space
うやつで
Station
すね。
as we acquire the
ク
signals
ルードラゴ
from
ン
space
は
to
スペ
go
ース
ahead and
X
provide
の
that to
製
you.
品ですよ。
But again, Thomas Pesquet will be photographing the station. At this point of the journey, there is a chance that Mark Vanaheim on board the International Space Station is inside the cupola. And we'll be able to capture some images from the Dragon. Now getting views from inside Dragon. The cabin lights are still off to reduce the glare from the window which Thomas Pesquet is at to allow him to take some photos of the International Space Station. Very, very clear. Now we're getting the views of the Dragon from the space station. Absolutely beautiful. We're now over the North Pacific Ocean, about 260 statute miles. We just passed over the east coast of Japan.
すごっ、綺麗。
In this view here, we have a great shot of the forward hatch with that nose cone open.
あとはもう1時間見てなきゃいけないんだ。そしたら
And if you're looking closely, you might
寝
see
よっかな。
there's a
う
great
わ
side
で
by
も
side there of the
ISS の
station
天
and
体がよ
Dragon
く下が
looking back at
全
each
部見
other.
える。
And that view of Dragon, you can actually see the fins of the Dragon trunk.
見て見て、
So if
あの
you were
丸
wondering
い空あれ
what,
見えま
from
すよ。
this angle might have looked like little spikes coming out
ちょうど
from
反
the
対側
side
で
of
すね。
Dragon. They look like spikes from this angle, but they're actually fins that
見た
are
方がいい
built
と思う。
into the trunk section
そうな
or
ん
the
だよ。あのね、9
unpressurized
時
section
の
of
イプシロン
the
の
Dragon.
打ち上げも見る
That
か
trunk
ら、
will be jettisoned
それも見
prior
るし、
to
この子のね、
the
着
capsule
水も
coming
見ます
back.
から。
Once that trunk is jettisoned, that will expose the heat shield,
楽しみにし
which
たい
is
っ
of
て
course
ね。
what we need in order to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and splash down.
That heat shield has the very important job of slowing the Dragon from what is essentially 17,000 miles per hour to about
やっと見られるようになったけど、リア
350
の配
miles
信
per
はこの辺で終わりに
hour.
しよう。
A ton of energy as the Dragon itself is really engulfed in plasma that's reducing that speed quite
こう見ると
drastically.
結構
Once it
ぐ
gets
るぐ
down
る
to
ぐるぐる。
350 miles per
早いね。
hour, it's really up to the parachutes in the atmosphere itself to slow Dragon down through a series of drogue and main parachutes down to a mere 15, 16 miles per hour before it splashes down off the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, while the temperatures near the heat shield
ドラゴン
can
の中は
get close
夜モー
to
ド。
3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, the inside of the cabin stays a pretty comfortable temperature. The crews that we have
次の
brought
リア
back
の配
home
信は
have
朝9
indicated that
時
it's
過ぎ
it's
ぐらい
actually a
です
pretty
かね。
comfortable ride
エ
in
プシロ
Crew
ンの打ち上げを
Dragon
中
during
継
that
しようと
descent
思いま
phase.
す。その後、お昼にこちらの
Wonderful
Dragon
side-by-side views. We're getting feeds from both the Dragon and the International Space Station. From the space station view, you're seeing
一緒に見ま
the
しょうね。
underside as the
すごい
Dragon
ほら見て
spacecraft
見
you
て
can
これ
see
ほら。
is wedged between the space station
わいい。
and the Earth.
このほら。
And by wedged, I mean there's a 250
この
mile distance
この
between
この
those
辺
two
とか可愛
things.
いこの
But
辺とか。
right now, the
これは希望かな？
Dragon is about 200 meters
多分。
from the
あ。
International Space Station. And we're seeing some of the features now. Cabin lights inside Dragon as we get some of those feeds as well, still turned off, allowing the photographs to be taken of the space station, part of this photographic survey of the exterior. And of course, we're getting wonderful views from the station, looking down at the Dragon capsule.
動かせたんだ。
Right below
動か
them,
せるよ。
259 statute
一緒に
miles
飛んでもいい
is
し。
the North Pacific Ocean.
よし、寝よう。みんなおやすみ。リアは寝るぜ。
Endeavour SpaceX on the big loop. Nadir waypoint has been reached.
次は朝9時にお会いしましょう。この子がうまくね、一周回って帰ってこられることを祈っております。
And Endeavour copy.
睡眠大事。ありがとう。バイ。おやすみありがとう。おやすみソニアありがとう。
And
一
we're
旦おや
now
すみありがとう。
directly beneath
この
the
ふりわかる
International
ね。
Space
すごいわ
Station
かるよ
Nadir
ね。
waypoint.
すごいよね。やっ
We
ぱ
are
なん
now
か宇
executing a
宙から見た
50-second
地球って
burn
割
to
となん
maneuver
か
from the Nadir point, or the
まんま
Earth-facing
って感
side
じ。
of the space station, over to the forward
エプシロン
end.
もおやすみあり
And
が
that
とう。
burn is in
ラル
progress.
ちゃんお疲れ様ありがとう。バイバイありがとうザブルちゃん。おやすみなさいありがとう。おブルースクリーン。お疲れ様ありがとう。やっぱ
And
こ
that
のこ
50-second
これ
burn is complete. You can see we're essentially right below the
セカンドバーンコン
International
プリートって
Space
言ってんの
Station.
燃えた
And
か
we're
な。
getting some great coverage, both from the
あー、続かれ
space
様
station
あり
side
が
using
とう。ア
Teacher
シソニ
satellites
ア
as
あ
well as
り
the
がと
Dragon
う。
spacecraft.
またねバイバイ。お、なにこれなにこれどこだろう。なにこれこの島みたいなの何。ひょろんとした島は何。超気になる。またリアゲッサーしよう。自動ゲッサーも。ではではバイバイ。お疲れ
Below
様。
the Dragon
また後で
spacecraft,
ね。
you're seeing some of the
これ
coastline of
こ
the
のま
Marshall
ま
Islands
見られるよう
in
に
the
みん
Pacific
なに
Ocean.
はこれあげるよ。はい貼っとくね。ではお疲れ様ありんでした。バイバイ。
Once again, the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft is basically directly below the station at this point in time. We are executing a fly-around maneuver, which is essentially one big loop around the space station. And the reason for doing this is we're doing a photographic survey of the station. Thanks to the several new installations on station over the last few years, the last fly-around maneuver was performed.